welcome to ConTinual, the convention that never ends. With me today on An Hour with ConTinual's interview show, we have one of the nicest science fiction and fantasy authors around, Todd McCaffrey. Welcome, Todd.
Hi, thank you for such a great introduction.
Well, you deserve it. You've put up with me on multiple panels and interviews over the years. One of the interesting things I discovered when I was prepping for this interview was that we actually have something in common. We both lived a significant chunk of our formative years in foreign countries. What was it like being an American teenager in Ireland in the 1970s?
Oh, God. There's kind of multiple parts to that. First, there's the whole going to Ireland, because I was a well-educated American. And as far as I knew, Ireland was back in the days of the Quiet Man, where they had shillelaghs and carts and things like that. And they never knew about electricity, let alone peanut butter. And of course, the world was going to end when I got there. I was pleasantly surprised. The most pleasant surprise as a 14-year-old was that my Irish pound or punt got a lot more stuff than my US dollar did. I basically paid half as much for candy over there in the first couple of years than I did in the States. So it was like, woohoo! And I discovered that while they did not have Milky Way bars, they had Mars bars, which were functionally identical except made with better ingredients. So that was kind of the first part of it. Then there was fitting into school. And I was always an outsider, even back in the States, but more so in Ireland. All of my best friends were a English lad, another English lad, and a Danish lad. So we were kind of all outside the norm. And I was warned that school over there was much tougher than it is over here, and it is. They grade no curbs. So if everybody in the class fails, oh well. And generally you'll see a letter grade below what you're used to, if not more. But I really enjoyed it. I was fortunately, pretty smart, and so picked it up and had some really great teachers. My English teacher accused me of having kissed the Blarney Stone because of the way I wrote, and it was pretty good. It was still, weird. But over time, it stopped being weird, terrible, and started being weird, kind of nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How did it change you?
Can't say. I'm the product of being changed. Well, you see, we got to Ireland partly as a result of the divorce. My mom divorced my dad in 1970, and we moved to Ireland officially because Charlie Haughey, the prime minister, or as they say in Ireland, the Taoiseach, had come up with a brilliant idea, which was to grant tax exemption to established artists and writers. So you weren't paying Irish taxes. And at the time, you had to earn like $70,000 a year before you had to pay US taxes. So no taxes needed to be paid for a long time, which meant everything coming in could go somewhere. So there was that helped us all. And boy, I've lost the thread of where we were going. Where were we going again?
You were going to say how it changed you, or whether it changed you.
Oh, how did it change me? Well, I picked up an accent that would have to best be described as the Pale accent. Most people don't recognize it that way, but in ancient times in Dublin, they built a fortified wall. And the wall was known as the Pale. Everybody that lived inside it was generally English and conquerors, and that particular accent prevails in the southern part of Dublin City. So in South Dublin, it's very posh, but in North Dublin, it's kind of, are you starting? Which is actually more of a North Irish accent, but it's a very harsher, different accent altogether. And so there's a divide there. And that part was interesting. I learned an awful lot more geography than I would have learned here in the States. Learned a lot better history, because Ireland was one of the two places where if they wanted to have a war, they would. The British and the French would get together and say, do you want to do Poland this time? No, I think Ireland, the weather's better, and bam. So there's all of that. There's some amazingly hideous stories from the English conquests. The British were not nice people. Although I love them as a species or as a race a lot, but You know, if you look at their conquest, they almost made us look good. Yeah, but it was also very nice to get this outside history viewpoint, because the Irish were neutral, were not, you know, aside from having people slaughter them every now and then, they weren't in the same place we were. So I got a way of looking at different things. I also got this marvelous introduction to language as culture. We don't think of it enough that way. Your language is your culture, and the Irish language, the way the Irish speak English, is different from the way we Americans speak English, and even different from the way the British speak English, or the Scots. And it gets interesting because it starts tuning you into this whole, you know, this word doesn't quite go the same way. And I also was forced to learn Force. They had this really cool thing, which they've done away with because they decided they wanted to be modern. But in Ireland, for the longest time, you couldn't afford to put somebody in secondary education for all those 4 years. So they had this thing for particularly poor farmers or whatever. They had this notion that everybody would, at age 16, take the intermediate certification exam. And if you pass that, you could go off to the farm or whatever, or you could continue and get your leaving certificate. So you had this intercert, which was basically a full court, you know, every subject exam, serious stress. I learned how to smoke then. And it really helped because it was a checkpoint in your life. It was a checkbox at 16. I am currently very much appalled at the educational system we have in America and in the world. I think we're going to reap a whirlwind on this at some point, but we're doing a terrible job of educating people. And we're sort of institutionalizing this notion that you must have a bachelor degree of 4 years just to prove that you can sit your ass down for 4 years. And it's pointless. You know, I learned how to build starships and other things like that, more or less, and cars and whatever, because I got a mechanical engineering degree. Anyway, Ireland was, at the time, it started out being, you know, like the end of the world, and slowly became not the end of the world. It was a great place to grow up. In the end, that's what I determined. But you got to understand that one of the cool things about getting older is you get more perspective and you get to look back on things. You know, while you're suffering it, it was unbearable. When you get to the far end and you can go, you know, you have all that interesting experience in your data banks, you can sit there and evaluate it and go, so yeah, it really helped.
Was it part of what made you want to be a writer, or was that just something you'd wanted to be all along?
I was writing from forever. I was, you know, my favorite in roughly, I think, 3rd grade, might have been in 2nd grade. I read The Wonderful Flight to the Mushroom Planet, and what's the other one? Space Cat. Space Cat was a big one for me. And so I was reading science fiction before I knew my mom was writing it. And I didn't always want to be a writer. I don't want to be a writer. I want to be a starship captain. If anybody's looking for, you know, great gray-haired starship captains, I'm your man. But don't give me one of these, you know, interplanetary spaceships. You know, nothing for that's just solar system. That is not a starship. Let's get this straight. And that's kind of been my bent since forever. You know, when we were doing the space mission, I wrote to Lyndon Johnson, President Johnson, and said, hey, I got an idea for, you know, how to keep your big Saturn V's from collapsing in high winds and all. And he wrote me back a nice reply, which I, of course, immediately lost. But science fiction, you know, it was there. It was in my bloodstream long before I realized it was anywhere else. I mean, I was also growing up with, you know, God Help Us All, the original Lost in Space, which ended up being, you know, bad episode after bad episode. But as somebody pointed out to me, when you're a kid, you don't have any standards because you just don't know. So I did that. I did Johnny Quest. I did, was it Astro Boy or Super Boy? I mean, you know.
Astro Boy, the anime?
Yeah. Well, back when it was just cartoons.
It
We
was
didn't
it was
call them anime
cartoons
then.
that
It was
happened.
cartoons.
It was a cartoon that happened to be made in Japan and
Yeah,
now
exactly.
considered the first anime. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, for me, I was a kid. It's just, oh, look, there's a cartoon. Do I like it? Maybe. I mean, Speed Racer, Johnny Quest.
Mhm.
So all of that, and for that matter, Fireball XL5 with the marionettes, Jerry Anderson.
Oh gosh, yes.
Mhm. So that's kind of where I was, and I had my. See, you know, when we talk about Ireland as a influential, life-changing situation, Ireland wasn't. Up until I was 12, I was going to join the Air Force. I was going to get 1,500 hours in fighters, and then I was going to apply to NASA, and I was going to become an astronaut. I knew this. When I was 12, they did the usual school exam and said, you need to see an optometrist. And at the time, now the rules have now changed, but at the time you had to have perfect eyesight if you wanted to become a fighter, well, a pilot. So my world collapsed then. You know, it was one of those quiet things because nobody really notices kids, but it was the end of my world. And it took a long while to recover from that. You know, so going to Ireland was just sort of like, oh yeah, more bad stuff, bring it on. You know, what the heck, it can't get any worse. But that was kind of where I always was. And the writing, it wasn't like I woke up one day and said, I'm going to be a writer. I like telling stories. I loved being in plays. I had a really, it's quite possible that today I would be diagnosed with ADHD, ADD, or any of the other things that say that I won't do what they want me to do in the classroom, which is really kind of like a lot of these things are. But my third grade teacher, I would get, we had some really nice rubber hand puppets. And I would get over there and I'd be playing with them and everything. And she kind of just let me. We did a third grade play that was based on that. No, we just shook the whole world. That was not anything but me and my fingers. But we did a whole play that was based on the wonderful flight to the mushroom planet. I got to be the co-pilot who got a concussion and turned evil until he got another concussion and turned good again. It was fun. So there was a lot of hamming going on as well in my childhood. And I, you know, there's a lot. One of the best things that's ever been said to me was by Brianna Winner, which is if you're creative, you're not creative in simply one area. Creativity is a thing, it's a spectrum. So people who say, I'm going to be a writer, it's like, what happened to your creativity? I mean, why can't you pick up some clay and throw a pot? Why aren't you dabbing stuff on the walls? Why are you restricting yourself? Because people who are creative shouldn't restrict themselves. They'll get unhappy. So yeah, we're way off the question. Wherever that poor question went to, it's gone.
When did you know you wanted to be a writer?
When did I know I wanted? I didn't. Like I say, starship captain in training. I like writing. What happened was Bill Fawcett.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you probably know the famous Bill Fawcett.
Oh, yes, I know the famous Bill Fawcett quite well.
Exactly. Well, so my favorite story about this was I was on a panel at LosCon, the Los Angeles Science Fiction Convention, years back. And there was me, and there was, I think, Tim Powers, and there was Will Wheaton. Oh, my gosh, and Armin Shimmerman. Oh, my gosh, what a sweet guy. And I was in between Will and Armin. I said Will and Armin. I almost guarantee Will Wheaton does not know me from Adam anymore. But the question was, well, how did you start writing? Right. And so I came off with my usual, oh, well, nepotism answer, which is, as you may have noticed now, not really true. But anyway, we'll just sort of let it sit there. And Armin, when it got to him, he says, well, it was Bill Fawcett. And I got the spacing wrong. It was me, Will, and Armin. Anyway, so Armin said, no, it was Bill Fawcett. And I interrupted and said, you know what? It was Bill Fawcett who started me writing too. And then Will Wheaton pulls out a notepad and writes in, very ostentatiously, no Bill Fawcett, which I thought was the quintessential. Anyway, I was a great war gamer. My brother and I both were great war gamers. I was the war gamer that got to lose a lot until I stopped losing a lot, which caused problems because I was supposed to lose a lot. Anyway,
brother?
Huh?
Older brother?
Oh yeah, older brother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're so much fun. A little sister too. So, but yeah, I was the middle child. The joy of it all was as time went on and Pern got bigger and bigger, some guys in the US decided that they wanted to make a board game out of it. And I was like, shaking my head. But that, of course, was Bill Fawcett and how we met Bill. And Sam Lewis did a marvelous job building the game. The Dragonriders of Pern board game is a great prisoner's dilemma sort of a game. And it sadly never really got the traction it deserved. But that's life. Anyway, so when that came up, Bill kind of roped me into writing thread fighting tactics on Pern, which later got into the Dragon Lover's Guide. And then after that, he started waving money in at me. And I was, at the time, I was 84. Yeah, I was learning to fly an airplane finally. And so I needed a lot of money. And then I had somebody else offer me a chance to write an animated screenplay, which was super cool. And I got lots of money and I learned how to fly that way. Yeah, so it was good. But yeah, that's kind of where it started. And I had always thought and kind of hoped that Pern would be dated, would become dated, and people would be going like, well, yeah, it was a classic, but because Pern is more than anything, it's about equal rights. It's about women as equals of men. I was kind of hoping we'd get there. We still haven't, which I think is just stupid. But that was sort of part of it. So I was a long time ago, 1996, somebody asked me, so this was after I was published, would I consider continuing the Pern legacy after Mom had passed? And I had two different answers. One was that one, and the other one was I don't have anything to write about. And that problem solved itself in about 24 hours. I had a dream.
It does, doesn't it? I
It
can't
does.
do that.
Give me 24 hours. Yeah. I literally had a dream and woke up and wrote down parts of the dream that became parts of the song that is part of Dragon's Blood. Anyway, so yeah, I didn't know I was going to be a writer. Come to think of it, Dean Wesley Smith didn't know he was going to be a writer either. So I guess I'm not alone in this boat.
Mm-hmm.
He was planning to be he was being raised to be a pro golfer. Yeah, you know, well, a lot of people come into this place not knowing they're going to be there, and I think that's part of why it works so well. You know, it's not like people wake up and say, I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to make lots of money, because let's face it, writing is hard work, and lots of money is, you know, something Stephen King and J.K. Rowling get. You know, you do it because you love it. If you don't love this, go find something else to do. You know, of course, once you get addicted to the fact that, you know,
it's a drug.
It can be really cool. Yeah. When we start talking about the Canaris Rift series, I'll be talking about the joys of being a full-time writer.
Oh yeah,
full-time independent writer, no less.
Yes, we will get to Canaris Rift.
Yeah.
It's just before we get there, however, you mentioned, you know, that you worked with, you were asked to continue your mom's legacy, and ultimately that involved actually writing with your mom. And yeah, how did that work out? I mean, I have several nightmares, and actually working with one of my parents when they were alive was one of them. I have said this many times. My father was 6'2". He had the kind of voice that could bend glass, and he was terrified of my 5'0" mother, who was a combination of the kinder, gentler qualities of Attila the Hun, Niccolo Machiavelli, and Joseph Stalin. So, you know, how did you work with your mom?
Well, you know, it's interesting. We have the stories we tell, and then we have the truth. So what had happened was I'd come up with this dream, and I came up with a proposal for it, and sent it into Del Rey, to the editor at Del Rey, and they said, yeah, let's go for this. So I was already working on that, or starting to work on that. But the whole kickoff into really getting me into the Pern series was having been asked this question and saying, no, I'm hoping that in the future we won't need this.
Right.
the editor had then said, well, will you please write a sort of a scrapbook of her life so that she'll stop writing this autobiography and get back to writing Pern stuff. And so that's how Dragonholder was born, which was a, at the time was titled The Life and Times So Far of Anne McCaffrey. I've got a new edition out now that is titled The Life and Times of Anne McCaffrey, because unfortunately, so far has happened. Anyway, so we were working on that, and we were talking. And I mean, Dragon's Blood was all me, but I was at the start of that, I was working with Dragonholder with the Anne McCaffrey scrapbook. I spent a lot of time interviewing her to get the data. And somewhere along the line, I said, I'd really love to collaborate with you sometime. And she said, I'd love to collaborate with you too. That's kind of where it sat. And then she got an offer to write for an anthology of Pern stories. And she was exuberant and happy, and she said, I'd like you to write on it in it. And how about the story of young Pimer? And I looked at that and I said, oh, okay. And I spent a time thinking about it. I thought, well, problem is Pimer was 7 when he got to Harper Hall, or maybe he was 10, but he was, for him to have had any adventures, he would have been about 7. And at the time I was going like, 7's too young to have adventures. I have since recanted on this opinion. But at the same point, I had in Dragon's Blood, I had a character who didn't have a backstory. So I developed this backstory for Pimer. And just while I was sort of thinking that we were going to go ahead, Mom said, I read the contract more carefully. It can only be Anne McCaffrey stories, which is really sad. And so then I was very depressed. And then Mom's next letter it's kind of like I was on this nice little roller coaster with my mom. I was like, so the next letter was, but I could write the story on your outline. I'm going, oh my God, Anne McCaffrey writing a story to my outline. That would be so cool. And then the next letter is, no, but it wouldn't be ethical. Oh my God. So that's where it sat for a bit until I realized that we could do a backstory and we could do a separate story, which became Dragonskin, which we wrote together. Now, Mom was a pantser. I'm pretty much a pantser now too, although I can go both ways. And she used to say, well, I know kind of where I want it to end, and I don't know what happens in between. So working with her and writing Dragonskin, we needed a solid outline, because it was kind of like, okay, I'll write chapter 1, you write chapter 2, and so on. And the rules were very easy to establish. You let the New York Times bestselling author win, and you let your mother win. So there wasn't going to be much argument on this one. But we did it. It was kind of fun because each of us made a start at the first chapter in the book, and we kept on going back in time more. So the first chapter we wrote was maybe chapter 4, and then that wasn't quite the right start. So we got to chapter 3, and then chapter 2, and then finally chapter 1, which became the real first chapter. It was weird. But that's kind of how that all happened. And from then on, she sort of, she let loose the reins more and more as we went further and further into the collabs. Because, so she said this most marvelous thing to me, which I treasure, which is, I trust you implicitly. The reason we wrote in third pass is because it was very obvious that Mom was severely attached to her own Pern characters. I totally understand, it's kind of like, somebody else play with Lessa? No! And we were sort of working on that. That's why we said in Sky Dragons that I'd finally convinced her she's playing with my characters, now she'll let me play with hers. And then unfortunately, she didn't get to play. But we were living on golden time, and we knew it. Back in 2000, she was due to come out. Mom gets some great fans. One of them was a shuttle pilot, an astronaut, Pamela Melroy. And Pamela Melroy invited Anne McCaffrey to come out and watch the launch of her shuttle up to the ISS. And Mom had a heart attack and couldn't make it. So she asked me to come out in her stead, and I was there and didn't get to see Pam, or actually I think I had to scrub the launch even. But that was when we knew we were on golden time. And then that was like, I want to say September, October of 2000. Then in Was it later? All right. But for narrative's sake, we'll continue with this. The dates may slip to protect the innocent, or
the guilty.
yeah. But then in 2001, she had a stroke. And we kind of knew then that, we were in golden time.
Yeah.
That you weren't guaranteed another day. And she lasted 10 freaking years, but she felt she was slipping. And she wanted to see her boys one last time. And so I'd arranged it. We'd agreed that my brother would be there for Thanksgiving and I'd be there for the week before Christmas. And unfortunately, she passed before Thanksgiving, while my brother was on a plane to go out and see her, which was kind of, yeah, that was because, yeah. So we wanted to keep a lid on it for a while because didn't want my brother to find out, through news reports that his mom had passed. Much prefer have somebody tell him in person. Anyway, that's what happened. But it was cool because she wrote an awful lot of books, solo, collab, and everything in that time. And really got to like it. But then again, she did say that, what was it? Something, I will get this wrong, but it's basically something like, I would never wish age on those who do not have the internal strength for it. It gets hard. Now I'm hoping to cheat that. We're getting pretty good with the anti-agathics and stuff, and we're learning a whole bunch of stuff. We know about senolytics and all this. I mean, we're really cusping to actually being able to prolong, life indefinitely, which would be huge.
Well, it would be a tremendous resource drain. You mentioned on one of your websites, and you have 3 that you're tied to, that, the population could easily exceed the capacity of the earth to produce food. And so one of the great problems with immortality is that the resource drain.
No, sorry, don't buy that at all. We have a limitation for how many people we can have on this planet. We haven't even touched the rest of the solar system. I mean, Elon Musk, for some strange reason, wants to colonize Mars. And it's like, did you know? My rule is once you're out of the gravity well, don't go back. They're very hard to get out of. And the other thing that's coming up, which is about past time, I talked about it to some friends, and I guess I didn't explain it to them properly because I didn't get it. I called it a farm in a box. But basically, one of our major last frontiers here is going to be moving agriculture off of the land. It's going to be freeing up all those people who are tied to acres and acres of land and moving it back into the cities. They're doing it. They're doing green cities. They're doing this. We're beginning to look at, let's all eat bugs. And that's going to change things. Now, the world population is, as far as I'm concerned, way too high. And that's an issue. But there's also the question of, well, what is a good life? What is an acceptable life? What is an unacceptable life? And do we as a species have the guts to say that nobody born on this planet will live in a situation we don't consider acceptable, which would mean we'd have to raise easily half the planet in income, wealth, and prosperity. And we haven't bought that. We're kind of all just sitting back on, we'll let the fates decide. The fates the fates don't care. The fates will just wipe the species out and we'll all be going, oh, that was a mistake. But one of the cool things about growing up in Ireland is I had a teacher who I thought might have been immortal. His name was Dr. John de Courcy Ireland. And he had been a seaman, a merchant marineman, and all over the place. And he would tell history as if he lived it. He would say things like, now Marie Antoinette was a terrible person. And he made you believe that, like, he knew, he was there. So I was quite willing to believe that he might actually be an immortal who was just hanging around teaching secondary school kids, because what the heck? Because we are endlessly fascinating. But my dad was in the States, and I was looking at the time, we were in the 70s. I was looking at us, there was saber rattling going on between the Soviet Union and the US. It's kind of like I said, if we have a nuclear war, we're probably going to blow ourselves right back to the Stone Age, and we won't be able to recover because we'll have already consumed those easy to get to resources. And it'll be the end of the species. And I was really depressed about it. And I sought a private meeting with him, and I laid this all out on the ground. And he said something that was really cool. He says, this isn't the first time we've been faced with a possible extinction event. Before the Great Fire of London, we were about at the point we're about to say cities are a bad idea, because they were. I mean, there was sewage all over the place. There were dens of illness and disease, and you wouldn't be able to survive unless you cleaned up your act. So the Great Fire of London came along and did it for everybody. And then Christopher Wren came back and designed sanitation system into the newly rebuilt London, which helped and helped turn the corner on that issue. We continually face these, hey, guess what? We can all die issues, and we survive. So are we going to continue to be lucky? It's been 75, no, it's coming on 77 years since we last dropped the nuclear bomb in anger. We don't give ourselves credit sometimes. That's pretty freaking cool. Now, admittedly, we have kind of come to accept that if we drop one, they're all going to fall. And then we're in my nightmare scenario. But I think it's huge. I think, there are days when we spend so much time saying what we're doing wrong that we forget what we're doing right. I mean, the James Webb Telescope, that blew me away. I've been looking at that, and as an engineer, I'm going like, these guys are nuts. There are so many moving parts, and they all have to be. It's like, and there's so many single points of failure in that system, and they aced it.
Sure.
I'm for that matter, landing. Who was the last one on Mars? I'm losing the name.
The rover.
Sojourner. Who?
The rover. The Mars
rover?
But
yeah, I mean the rover and the helicopter, but I forgot their names. Perseverance, I think it is.
Yeah,
but
I think that.
But the way they did that with the little cargo lift thing, instead of just landing it on Mars, no, they have to go ahead and get it close to Mars. Then they're going to lower it down on a boom. Then they're going to have this little boom mechanism, fire rockets to lower it gently to the ground, and then it's going to unhook and fly away. And I'm going like, what's wrong with you people? And they got it all right. It was just wow.
We love our Rube Goldberg devices, and I'm not sure anybody younger than us will know what I'm saying.
But we did it, and that's really cool because, one of the things about us is we grew up knowing that rockets blow up. That's kind of what they do. That's what they did. That was the deal. You put something, this big, huge phallus symbol on a launch pad, you lit it and it went boom. Wow. Very rarely did it work right. And now we've gotten so much better, but duh. It's kind of like, when we first developed flying machines, they crashed a lot because we had to learn. So now we have people like Elon Musk it blew me away. The whole, okay, when he started launching his rockets, they were what we call big dumb rockets. It's like it goes up and you lose it. How stupid is that? And then he was doing this thing with, I want to say cricket, that's probably not the right word, grasshopper or whatever it was, the little hopper that was landing over in Boca Raton. And I did not put two and two together, I confess, until he starts coming up with these same big dumb rockets, only now they're landing on their tail. And they
just
can be
like
reused.
In Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon.
Just like, you look at the design of his starship. It's a Chesley Bonestell 3-fin frickin' starship. It's like, I never thought that was going to work, and now he's doing it. So, and for that matter, people have been talking about, well, you can't go faster than the speed of light. And then Alcubierre comes up with proof that if you could use planetary-sized negative energy, it'd be doable. Now, admittedly, we have not found planetary-sized negative energy yet. But then I think White, and I don't know everything on this, came along and said, oh, but wait a minute, here's a way to do it a little bit easier. So you don't actually have to use all that negative energy, which, by the way, we're not sure if we can get. And it's just getting easier and easier. And then one day we're going to be sitting there going like, yeah, we did it.
Life imitates art. all the time. And I was talking to Catherine Acero last year, and apparently she did a mathematical proof that said it's possible.
Yeah, I think we're missing a whole bunch of stuff. Physics is, every time physics breaks, I cheer, because when physics breaks, the rules have to change. You know, and there's a whole bunch. I mean, we're getting so many fast radio bursts and other stuff out there, and it's kind of like every time we get them, people are going like, and you know, nobody's willing to say it could actually be manufactured by, you know, an advanced technology. We don't want to admit that yet, because, and I don't blame us, but you know, one of my trying to find the word, singularities,
okay,
where everything changes after it, would be if we had undeniable proof of alien life, intelligent alien life. And I think we're going to be denying it for a very long time, because we want to, because it really changes the way we look at the universe. And that's an issue. And that's one of the joys of science fiction, is it challenges us to change the way we look at the universe. Now, one of the joys of fantasy is we get to explore, we get to go places where you can't go in science fiction, just can't. Or although nowadays with the whole metaverse and VR and everything, you potentially could, but it's kind of a cheat. So anyway, yeah.
Anyway, well, speaking of fantasy, yeah, we're going to come to that. You know, could you tell us a little bit about the Twin Souls series and the people you write it with, the Winter Twins?
Actually, this is going to be long. So I met Britt Winter and her identical twin, mirror image identical twin, Brianna Winter, at one of the get-togethers at Writers of the Future. And at the time, it was kind of like, I mean, you haven't met them yet. They're like 5 foot and seriously cute.
I saw the picture. And
they look like Disney princesses, you know?
They do.
And it's only until you start talking to them that you realize also, oh, by the way, they happen to be freaking world-class geniuses. And so I got talking with Britt, and we started talking about art, because I've been taking some art classes at the local community college, mostly because I was going to be there anyway, because my kid was taking community college classes. And I kind of got into it. And Britt said, well, why don't you do something with this? And I was like, So it planted the seed and the thought, which later turned around through a number, the world is weird. I was also at the community college. I was taking classes on game design. Now, I have designed games, but this is computer games. And the guy who was actually teaching the particular class suggested that I become a teacher. He thought I was good enough, and he would have me in his games development department, teaching C++ or something like that. I thought, hey, that's worth trying. So bureaucracies, you gotta love bureaucracies. We should fix that. I start gathering stuff, and I discover that, well, first I have to prove that I have this Irish degree. It has to be equivalent to a bachelor's degree. So I go through the hoops and jumps to go ahead and get some recognized thing to go recognize my degree, which was wild, and go back to the regional community college board and say, look, here's proof I have a mechanical engineering degree. Oh, you have a mechanical engineering degree. Well, we'll have to see if we can find some mechanical engineering classes for you to teach. You know, because I don't have a computer science degree. These guys think real small, you know, this box must be in here. So that was kind of like, oh, great. But I had the proof, demonstrable proof that I had a good degree, and somebody was saying, and then my art teacher also comes up and says, you should think about applying for a Master of Fine Arts. I thought, that could be nice. And then another teacher I was taking classes with, they were both alums from the same place, said, you ought to consider taking a master's degree at. And I said, what the heck, I'll apply. They accepted me. I was one of the oldest there. I was the oldest probably in the art department, but I was one of the oldest actually in the master's track courses at Claremont Graduate University. So I had a blast. I got to use more of my mechanical engineering degree in those 2 years there than I did anywhere else. And it was huge. But anyway, back to Britt and Brianna. So somebody points out that they're local. I'm going, oh, hey, writers group, that'd be cool. So we start getting together and we hang out and everything. And after a while, I'm going like, I have this idea in the back of my head. I wonder what it'd be like to collaborate with them. And apparently they'd had the same idea in the back of their head because they see me as, you know, Todd McCaffrey, famous science fiction author. And I see me as the guy I look at in the mirror, you know, but I said, well, yeah. And then Brianna had this idea. I can't give away a lot of it because it still should come out in the books, but she had this idea for a world and she started working on it. And she had this opening sentence. Kreia was bored, and when she was bored, bad things always happened, which I loved. And so we got together and we started working on that and developing the world. And that led to The Winter Wyvern. And the next book I did more than they did because I said, I want to tell it from the other side. And the other side is the first airship and how it got into a battle with a dragon and a wyvern and stuff like that. And then more Kahaktosaurus occurs, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. But that's sort of where that all started from. At the same time, in a sort of a whole new realm, we said, let's go, you know, this is cool. We can do one of these a month. It'll be fun. But we want to tell a bigger story, a novel-length story. They have three science fiction books out of their own that they self-published way back when self-publishing was considered, you know, vanity press rather than a sensible business move. But they'd never done fantasy. I've never done fantasy really, except with the Twin Souls stuff. And they wanted to explore. They found a couple of eccentric old maids in like the 18 somethings, and they decided that let's go build a story from that. And we went on and on and on. And the cool thing is they're identical twins. They've been telling each other stories since they could babble and before people could understand their babbling. They've learned to leave their ego at the door a long time back. I have learned that too. One of the things is when you're collaborating, you can't sit there and say, well, this is my character and this is your character or anything like that. It's got to be, particularly when you're outlining, it's got to be no holds barred. Anything can go, you know, oh, I don't like that. How about if we kill this guy? Okay. How about if we kill this? Oh my God, my favorite guy. You know, he can come back as a ghost.
Hey, so it's speculative fiction. That's possible.
We started moving along, and we built a world and a plot and the characters, and then we added more. We put in more depth. We did, you know, I would have written Rev 1. We're up to like Rev 8 now, revision 8 of this thing in the world, and we have a whole bunch of world there. So it got deeper, and because I'm a pantser, things happened that were unexpected. Because I love the unexpected. I like it when my characters get up and say, "No, I'm not doing that. You're wrong. You know, I'm doing this over here. Live with it." I like that because I believe they're real characters, and we got that a lot in The Magpie's War, which has been out since May of last year. And is a fantasy competing with all the other fantasies in the known universe, which is a problem because we're competing with all the other known fantasies in the universe. But we'll see what happens. And also, you know, there's been some travails and things like we moved from California, LA to Las Vegas. And I'm actually pleasantly surprised about Las Vegas. Some of the best food in the world at reasonable prices. You know, you think Las Vegas and the Strip, which is how I always thought of it, and you know, there's more to it than the Strip. It's like kind of like trying to say that Los Angeles is just the Hollywood sign. It just ain't so. Anyway, so we started writing, and it's been really wild and cool.
And so you're continuing to collaborate with them?
We're working on it. it's life has gotten in the way. Britt's gotten married, and other stuff has been happening, things we can't mention without getting little blurbs. And so, and by that I mean the thing that everybody is in the background of everybody's mind at this point in time that will shortly be forgotten. Similar,
the current unpleasantness, as it
current
were.
unpleasantness, the late great unpleasantness. Yes. Anyway, so yeah, we're kind of there. They have been doing a couple of independent things. They had a short story in Galaxy's Edge. They also have a couple of other deals. I guess I shouldn't speak about them, so I won't, but things are getting interesting. Because until the ink dries and everything's out, basically until it's released, you don't say anything, especially if it's Hollywood. Anyway, so it's been incredible, a lot of fun. We've learned a lot from each other. Their dad did all their covers. So the Twin Soul series is pretty much all Jeff covers. I do the text layout. And it inspired me to start looking at laying out my own covers. So pretty much all of my books, LA, the Jupiter Game, the Steamwalker, the new Canaris Rift stuff, those covers are me. And because I can do covers now, I change them. It's like, this is not working. This book is not selling. Let's change the cover. Okay. Whereas if you're changing the cover and well, if you're traditionally published, that ain't happening. If you're indie published and you got to use a cover artist, it's like, oh, sure, I'll change the cover. There's another $300, ouch. And that's a low price for a good cover. So it's been fun. It's been really educational. And yeah, I'm kind of having a blast, except for, all the unpleasantness and not being able, I'm looking forward to WonderCon.
You mentioned Canaris Rift. And that was where I was going to go next, actually.
It's a great place to go.
It marks a return to science fiction for you. Could you tell us a little bit about those books? Because I understand the first one released in November, second in January, third's coming up in March, fourth in May. Is that the complete series?
No.
Okay.
I think there's two more books. There may be 200 more books, but I think there's 2 more books. Some of my books start out because people throw out challenges. The Jupiter Game came about because our lawyer, Mom's lawyer, J.A. Katz, the famous Katz who defends dragons, marvelous guy, once commented, how come there's no science fiction books about lawyers? Very sad voice, And so I thought, challenge accepted. And the Jupiter Game morphed into something a little bit more like a book about politicians, but there was still the lawyering was what started it. Then more recently, another friend said to me, we were meeting at a convention and she was bringing me up to speed on her siblings. And she says, well, my sister was drying explosives in the oven. I went, did the house burn down? Did the fire department get there? You sound so calm. She said, oh no, it was for a science project. It was okay. But with a line like that, I mean, how can you not write something with that line? So that prompted me to start coming up with this thing. And that was the Canaris Rift. And I have all sorts of weird stuff in it. And then I loved it so much when I was done, I immediately started writing book 2, The King's Ghosts. And then I got into book 3. Now I'm in book 4. Actually, I'm done with book 4. It's over with alpha readers, and I'm jogging into book 5. And wow, it just keeps on getting bigger, and it keeps on getting wilder. It's probably beyond the realm of science fiction at this point. And certainly, if you're saying hard science fiction, no, it ain't no hard science fiction. I had started with the idea that I wanted to do a space opera. And it pretty much went that way until about the last 3 or 4 chapters. And then it became different. Some of the influences in it are Heinlein's Time for the Stars, because I always wanted to do more stuff with telepathy. Mom's Tower in the Hive series, the Rowan, Damien, and so on. James Blish's Cities in Flight, if you remember that one from way back when. And the whole Mill SF genre. So the Lois McMaster Bujold, Vorkosigan series, and the David Weber Ona Harrington series would be two that come to light. But when you read the book, you're going to go, what? But the other thing is, so one of the things that happens in Canaran in Raw Space, the first book, is that our bad guys, we don't know who they are yet. Let me back up a little bit. Our character, newly graduated from the academy, top in her class, is going on her midshipwoman MIDI cruise.
Yes.
Should be the time of her life. She gets assigned to the laundry ship. The same ship her sister is in command of, which should not happen. And it's kind of like, okay, the laundry ship for the 5 fleets. Your job is to go around the place delivering fresh laundry to all 5 fleets, wherever they are. Yay, joy. Well, somewhere along the line, somebody plants a bug, a little bacterial, whose first effect is to eat all the cotton in everything. And pretty much cotton is everywhere because it happens to be the major export of this particular planet, among other things. So all the uniforms are conveniently cotton until you wake up the next morning and find out all you got is kind of like digested fluff. And it goes on from there. Now, this should be, the opening for amazing humor. And it is a little bit, but I decided I was going to respect my characters. So I wasn't going to sit there telling jokes at their expense or disrespecting them. So yeah, they get to spend, all of a sudden they're on a starship and they're butt naked. But it's kind of like if you've ever even envisioned a nudist colony, after a while it gets kind of normal. And they're all professional, they're military, they're naval, so they just deal with it. And then things get worse, but that's another problem. But so it was interesting because I had originally thought, okay, this is going to be fun. This is the humor. And then I just decided that I wanted to respect my characters. I didn't want to make fun of them. I didn't want to have people laugh at them. I like my characters. They're good. They're cool. And then they come to this amazing challenge, which, it really is. And they rise above it. And it's more than that because this, the bug, nasty little bug, once it's finished eating all the cotton, it goes into its second phase. And the second phase is more deadly, but also in a bad way. So we move on from there. So it was a lot of fun. And because I was pantsing it, I didn't know what was going to happen next. It all kind of worked. I was trusting my subconscious in a big way. It's kind of like, okay, we're not going to write down. We're not going to figure this out. We're not going to do the big, huge story arc and all this other stuff. We're just going to tell the story. And it worked. And it got me into the book 2 and book 3. And now I'm in a situation where we are now fighting a whole nother universe. And, it's kind of like in a universe, there are a trillion galaxies. Mm-hmm. And in my book series, mankind is kind of spread out a little bit in our galaxy. So the odds are only 1,000,000,000 to 1 against. I think it gets to be a lot of fun. And we'll see how it goes. Like I say, I'm starting book 5, and I'm hoping this particular branch of it will end in book 6. But it has been revelatory as I write. It's kind of like, oh, that's why they did that stupid thing. And there are still a couple of like loose ends and I'm going like, I need to tell how does that work? But it's just been a ton of fun. Mm-hmm. So that's why I went back over there. I have a number of books that are begging to be written. I bullet pointed 10 books I wanted to finish. None of these were on that list, except maybe Raw Space. But the Jupiter game, which is aliens reach out to us in the orbit of Jupiter, and they say we've got faster than light drive, but we don't. What's their game? What are they doing? That's a lot of fun, and it's begging for the sequel, which I started the first 1,000, 2,000 words on, but it's been begging for a sequel for a while. My hardish science fiction book, LA, is about artificial intelligence, and I know in my head about 3 more sequels to it. But one of the things I discovered, at least the way I write it, when you're writing about an artificial intelligence, it's 1,000 times faster than human beings. You need to give yourself a lot of time to think so that you can come off as that 1,000 times faster thing. So that's going to be fun. The Steamwalker. So the Steamwalker is an alternate history where I kick off the Industrial Revolution a good 30 years early. My heroine is a good Scottish lass named Daniel Walker, who goes by Danny, of course. Mm-hmm. And she has a way with steam and steel. And she decides that rather than having to deal with terrible roads and everything, what they need to do is build themselves a wagon on legs that can walk. So think AT-AT in its earliest incarnation, as it were. So I have this nice thing, just as Bonnie Prince Charlie comes and liberates Edinburgh and all history breaks. So I finished that one, and I have the sequel, which is getting real interesting. I haven't worked on it in a long while, but when I think about it, it's kind of like, So my biggest problem is there's not enough of me to write what I want to write. I think everybody has that problem, but it's been interesting.
And it's not like you aren't seeking out new challenges, because weren't you talking about doing something, recording your own audiobooks when you went online?
Well, yeah, I don't know if you've looked into audiobooks. Generally speaking, audiobooks run around about 40 hours for a regular book. That's how long it's going to take to speak it. And the rate on an audiobook is around about $250 per finished hour. So you're talking about a significant outlay with an unknown return. And I'm quite willing to own up to some Scottish ancestry and being a little bit, shall we say, concerned with expenditures. But I decided, what the heck? I'll give this a whirl. And of course, being me, I bit off the hardest project first, which is I actually did an audiobook for LA. And it took at least a year to read it in between other stuff. And I found a number of things that I would recommend against. If you get regular text, when we're writing, we're saying, "Are you going to the park?" He said. "Why, yes." "Why do you ask?" she said. We generally, when we read it, the he saids and the she saids just disappear. But when you're reading it out loud and you're reading a lot, you tend to forget who you're reading, and it's late, which is why, radio plays work differently. We have different voices and everything. So I started doing that. And finished LA, and it went out, and I didn't say a word about it. And then it started selling. And I went, wow, maybe I should do this again. So I'm actually in the process of doing the Jupiter game. But I decided, it's that ham actor in me. In LA, I had voices because I couldn't not. And so they weren't consistent, unfortunately. So I'd have somebody have an accent like this, and then the next day I'd be recording and they'd be having an accent like this. And I was like, so the right thing to do is to turn your book into script format, pull the sides, the actual one character speaking things, speak all their dialogue at once, do it for everybody else, and then meticulously slice that whole thing back into a real novel. That's what I'm trying now. And it's fun. I mean, I'm having a ton of fun doing it. It's kind of like, so I'll, okay, what accent am I gonna get for this? My biggest problem is women's voices, but I do what I can, and at some point, if this gets really big, I'll start dragging other people in to be voices as well. But the Jupiter game is kind of ripe for it. The other thing is it gets you, again, coming back to creativity. Oh, yeah, shook the world again. Coming back to creativity, there's so many sides to us. We don't know. We haven't explored them. Have you ever written a comic? Have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? You may find out that there's something that calls you far more than what you're doing right now, because you haven't tried it yet. Knitting, crocheting. I don't think I'll ever be able to crochet. I can knit. Anyway.
If you can knit, you can crochet. Crochet is easy.
Also, if you look at knitting, dear God, if you honestly look at knitting, It is the most amazing thing ever because you're making a three-dimensional object out of a one-dimensional, two-dimensional thing. And you're doing manifold folds of space. I think there's a story out there already about the lady who knitted a starship. I can believe it. There's a whole bunch of fold stuff in space. Anyway, so I have so much fun doing this, and I get inside the story more. I'm coming back through a story and I know it better because now I'm going back and I've read it out loud. And it really, really, really helps you get inside your story. So it's been advice that Mom had given in a different format forever, which is, if you want to see if your story's working, read it out loud. So now we're taking it up to the next step. Read it out loud, record it, put it up on ACX and sell it. What the heck? Because not everybody absorbs the same way. So, the next step is obviously film, but there's a rule on film. It's the old golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. So that's a different story, but
yeah, we're coming up on the end of our hour. It's flown by very, very fast. And I've got just two questions. And if you want, you can combine them. And one is, and you kind of alluded to this, what's next for you? And the other one is, what do you wish people knew about Todd McCaffrey, writer?
What's coming up next for me? I'm working on book 5. I want to get these 6 books in the series done. It's the first time I will have start to finish written a big series. The Twin Soul series is sort of an ongoing thing. Actually, the Twin Soul series is huge. It's only going to get bigger and cooler, but it's a different thing. It's a different format. Twin Souls is a very short, quick read format. These are full-on books. But the Jupiter Game is calling me back for a sequel. LA is calling me back for a sequel. The Steamwalker is calling me back for its sequel. So I wish I could do all of them. And I've got new stuff. I have an idea where every 2,000 years, a new pair of gods are created to determine the future of mankind. Fantasy, obviously. But it started with a story that was called The Hell in a Handbasket. And I actually explained the science and rationale of actually traveling to hell in a handbasket. You can't get there any other way. So, very important. And I have a whole bunch of others. I got more stories to write than I have time right now. I have looked at Kevin Anderson's, go off into the woods and dictate. Not quite sure it'll work for me, but yeah, I keep on thinking about it because it almost combined the whole, read the book, write the book, audio the book thing together. One nice thing. And what was the second question? Brain.
What do you want people to know about you? Yeah, what's the one thing that you want them to take away from this interview or to know about you as a writer?
I think I'd like people to know that I write in all sorts of places. I'm at a point now where I'm writing what I love, which I think is very important. A lot of times we're worried about writing to market and what the fans think. And I love the fans. But every time I start saying, oh, the fans will like this, my writing goes to crap. So the power we get in our words is when we put our soul into them. And we're not putting our souls in when we constrain ourselves and put blinders on and say, I've got to write this away. So, you'll get an interesting ride if you pick up a Todd McCaffrey book. Not always guaranteed to go the way you thought it would, but you'll get an interesting ride. And, I hope you stick around and check them out.
That's a good wish. And yeah. I think that once they read some of these stories, they will. So anyway, thank you so much for talking to me today, Todd. And
thank you so much for listening to me. Because it was mostly just me blathering on, but it was fun.
But that's great. It's an easy interview when I don't get answers like yes, no, And
Yeah, that's a shy person. Yeah. Oh
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
On shoulders. I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
yeah. I
Well, I
had,
mean, I think that's one of the things we have to, as writers, we kind of have to learn. I mean, I just read a 1-star review on one of my books. It's kind of like, okay, mom used to say never read reviews, but when you're an indie, you got to kind of read some of them. And sometimes it's kind of, you never know. And the thing I've learned is, not every book is for every person, which is good because, yeah. So it's interesting. If you want to talk indie, I can talk to you about making your own cover, about using InDesign to lay out your book, about getting it up on Amazon, because I've been doing that a lot. And it's got, with the 20 books, short as they may be, laying out 20 books, you learn something about layout after a while. That's been fun. Anyway, thank you so much for asking me to be here.
oh, it was our pleasure. It really was.
Cool. Yeah.
And thank you out there from ConTinual, the never-ending convention. See you next time.